Hello everybody, this is Abigail Sides. I am presenting on the canon text for this mystery pairing that my group will be presenting on. Before we move on and get started, I want to give credit to the lovely Christina Torres and Ariana Cruz, who both just did a fantastic job at providing content and also quality to these slides. They did a wonderful job on their parts, and I can't wait for you to see or listen to their presentation. So let's get started. First, I was going to show a clip from BBC's Sherlock, where Sherlock and John first meet, but through the voiceover that I have, there's not really a good way to do that, so I'll just leave it up to you if you want to go watch it. It's on YouTube. These are our covers, and this is my slide for A Study in Scarlet. So to begin with, I thought it appropriate to provide a sort of character profile base so that we could get a good foundation for the story and also the quote or the excerpt that I'm going to be reading. So first we have Sherlock Holmes, who I believe is inarguably probably the most famous detective in literature. That's my opinion. I think he's pretty renowned. But anyways, he is an eccentric private detective with incredibly sharp observation and deduction skills. There's so much more depth to him, but we're going to move on because there's not enough time to talk about everything in depth as it deserves. Next we have John Watson, and he is the essential first-person narrator of their adventures. He's also a medical doctor, and he becomes a friend to Sherlock Holmes. In A Study in Scarlet, Sherlock and Watson first meet, and then they become flatmates, and then they start investigating together. And their first investigation begins when they find a dead man's body, and near that dead man's body they find the letters R-A-C-H-E in blood on the wall. Now this is a little bit strange, and later on the readers find out that R-A-C-H-E means revenge in German. So they kind of follow a thread from the dead man's body and backtrack and just investigate along the way everyone that he was kind of associated with, where he came from, and they source eventually the truth of behind the dead man's body, and they do that together. So I'm going to move on to my excerpt now. I consider that a man's brain originally is like a little empty attic, and you have to stock it with such furniture as you choose. A fool takes in all the lumber of every sort that he comes across, so that the knowledge which might be useful to him gets crowded out, or at best is jumbled up with a lot of other things, so that he has a difficulty in laying his hands upon it. Now, the skillful workman is very careful indeed as to what he takes into his brain attic. He will have nothing but the tools which may help him in doing his work, but of these he has a large assortment, and all in the most perfect order. It is a mistake to think that that little room has elastic walls, and can distend to any extent. Depend upon it, there comes a time when for every addition of knowledge you forget something that you knew before. It is of the highest importance, therefore, not to have useless facts, elbowing out the useful ones. Now this excerpt I chose because I think it really does a good job at encapsulating the essence of one of the main themes, I believe, from this text, which is critical thinking, the art and science of observation and deduction. And Sherlock is, in essence, the icon for those themes. He uses his mind to its fullest extent, and we kind of get to see what ensues after that as a result. Now, this is Ariana's slide about the YA text, and I'll let her tell you guys about that. And this is her excerpt. This is Christina's slide about our themes, and I'm going to let her get into it, but I do want to say something before I move on about the themes. When we think of Sherlock, we often think of mystery and adventure, kind of a suspenseful theme. But I think that when we immediately go to that, we can often glaze over or forget about some more intricate themes, like the theme of friendship. And this one is really, really important, I believe, in the classic text especially, but also for the YA text. It's the significance of friendship and what that does to a person, and how friendship can kind of creep its way into someone's life. They don't really get to see how rapidly it really takes place, because it's just day by day this bond develops and cements itself, and then eventually you realize, what would I do without this person? They're like my right arm. And I think friendship is, in essence, perhaps the most important theme of A Study in Scarlet, because it shows how these two people, these two strangers, can come together, and then they develop a bond, and they can kind of balance one another out with their own strengths, and their needs will be met through the other person's strengths filling in where their weaknesses are. So I think that friendship theme is a really significant one in these texts. This is also Christina's slide, but I will say something about the connection between these two texts and the rationale for why we put them together. I won't go too in detail, but I will say that I think A Study in Scarlet by Brittany Cavallaro is wonderfully respectful of the canon text, and it also just provides such a fresh take on some of the same ideas, some of the same themes, which then in turn kind of carves out this avenue to look back at the canon and say, listen, this is a great book, this is a great modern revisitation of some of these ideas, here's what it's based in, but it does provide such a really good, accessible newness for perhaps a younger crowd. Alright, this is the additional materials page, my favorite slide in the whole presentation, because I get to talk about some film, I get to talk about some fun stuff. So first we have, over here in the top left hand corner, A Study in Scarlet is a series, which I think is really great because it harkens back to kind of that idea of the series adventures of Sherlock and Watson that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle writes. So I'm really excited to get into those. It looks really fantastic. And we also have over here A Study in Scarlet audiobook. Quick rationale for audiobooks. I think they're fantastic, not just for people who want to learn or read in an audible way, but also for people who are busy, for students who have a real problem with motivating themselves to sit down and stick their eyes to the pages of a book. Sometimes I was that student when I was really not interested in a text. It was hard to just drag myself there and pull myself into it. It takes a lot of motivation to do that. So I think that an audiobook can really throw a student into a world almost as in a film does. But it's also great because it provides a dual learning opportunity where students can be listening to this story unfold and also taking notes or maybe drawing pictures about what they're reading or what is being read to them. So that's kind of why I think that audiobooks should be accessible to students, and I think that it's really important to be able to provide those as an additional material for your students. Alright, let's talk about Sherlock from BBC. This is a fantastic series. I don't have enough words to describe how wonderful it is. If you've seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. It really does a fantastic job at being respectful to the original text while also interesting readers with a little more of a relatable modern time take on those adventures. And it does a phenomenal job at developing that theme of friendship and friends becoming family and what that looks like and that tight-knit bond and loyalty that's there. So we're going to move on. Sherlock Holmes with RDJ is phenomenal. It's great. It's funny. It's got kind of an eerie, creepy side to it as well. It is really a fantastic rendition. I think it's a great it's a respectful rendition in that it stays really true to some of the story's elements and brings that out. So those are really good if you haven't seen them. And then we also have The Hidden Staircase, which is a Nancy Drew novel. Now this is, if you aren't familiar, Nancy Drew, there's a whole novel series and there's a ton of them. And they're really great for kind of switching up that main character and throwing in a little bit more of maybe a relatability to a different audience. I felt a better connection to Nancy Drew than a lot of other stories in which there were male protagonists, and that's not always the case, but I thought it was really cool to have kind of that to look up to. Now there's also Sammy Keys, which I never read, but I've heard is really good from some of my friends. And I would probably put this at a middle school range, because of the things that I've read about it. Some of the artwork on the outsides looks like it's really good for that kind of range, and it's good to kind of key it down a little bit from Sherlock, which I would not really put in front of a 6th grader or a 7th grader. So there's that also, and then the last thing that I have on this page that I want to talk about is the Nancy Drew PC games, and I might be nerding out a little bit about these, but I think that they're really awesome, and I don't know if anybody else played them, but there's something particularly unique about story games, because what better way to immerse somebody than like throw them into the story where they are the protagonist. They have to make the decisions about who to talk to or what kinds of things to investigate and things to snoop around in, and that's a great game series. I think through and through each of them are really fantastic. Alright, so those are my additional materials, and in class we would have taken questions, but unfortunately because of the outbreak we are not able to do that live. So if you do have questions, please email me, email one of my group mates. I'm sure they would be happy as I would to answer any of your questions. If you have suggestions about other materials to use, or you just want to chat about something that we mentioned in the process of presenting, please do email. It's important to keep that connection going even though we're not able to meet in person. I hope that you stay well, and I hope that your family members stay well. Please be safe, and thank you so much for listening.